All right, once again, happy Solo Sexual Pride Day. It's Evelina Falinta's 43rd birthday, and I'm once again gonna have to think hard about just where I belong in the world. I don't do very good with people, so I may have to think about my career. I may have to pivot my career. Aspirations. And I may have to pivot where I live as well. And so with great anxiety, I went into the office today, and I'll let you pause the video to think about what happened before I tell you exactly what happened. Well, my boss was very understanding and gave me the day off, but unfortunately, just as I thanked him for it, as soon as I said thank you, I realized, well, I kicked the can down the road another 6 months, and then I'll have to come back to the same problem. I had a lot of anxiety asking for the day off at my previous job at a different tutoring center as well, and I God ended up wanting me to take the day off anyway. So it turned out I didn't even have to ask. Uh, Hopefully, he doesn't do that to me again because that was kind of painful too. Uh, but I as soon as I said thank you to my boss, I realized, okay, I kicked the can down the road 6 months, and next time the can's going to be even heavier because during the winter time, I hope to put some UV lighting at my desk in the office, and it's going to draw a lot of questions from the students. I'm probably going to damage all the reputation I built up during the 2 months I've been working. They're just doing that, and between now and then, I'll probably have a computer gaming conference I want to go to, among other things. Not to mention, sometimes kids at the tutoring center bring in foods I'm allergic to. I'm constantly having to explain to them, please don't eat at the desk. It's our policy not to eat at the desk anyway, and but oftentimes I let kids slide when I'm not allergic to it. I need to stop doing that. Even when they eat foods I'm not allergic to, I'm going to have to stick up for myself. Otherwise, it's going to look like I'm practicing favoritism. But 6 months from now, that can's going to be even heavier. That's the problem. And so as soon as I said thank you to him, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking I've only kicked the can down the road 6 months, and that really bothered me. But you know what? I got 6 months, and now I have to worry about the UV lighting uh, and the computer gaming conferences and the food allergies. Although the food allergies, technically, I am following their policy. It's just that I often don't. I often let it slide when kids eat stuff that I'm not bothered by. So I need to stop doing that. Otherwise, it's going to look bad when I have to actually set the line. Um, anyway, but I want to move to Taiwan. And the reason for that is that I seem to have no problems communicating my needs over in Taiwan. As a matter of fact, 3 years ago, I was staying in a hostel in Taiwan, and they had a limit. You could only book the place for 7 days. And I booked it 7 days thinking I'll look for another place when I get there, once I can go out on the street and look. Uh, so I stayed there on the fifth, or maybe it was the fourth day. I talked to the staff there and asked if I could, since this is such a good match, of if it were okay for me to stay the whole 3 weeks there. And I got my way. I mean, it was technically in bold letters on the page, maximum stay 7 nights, and I talked my way into staying there for 3 weeks without a problem. That would never work here in the United States. I'm just not a very big people's person here in the United States. Taiwan also accepts solo sexuals a heck of a lot better than here in the United States. And here in the United States, every time I get my way for being solo sexual, it just feels like a kick of a can down the road, right? It never feels like I actually won some kind of battle, right? And so I'm sick and tired of kicking that can. I really am. Um. Anyway, I I I don't feel a whole lot of acceptance for being solo sexual. I'm still angry about the time that my boss kept saying that we had one more student, two more students, and I ended up starving to death in the. I got to my car and I fainted. Not to mention, I was hoping to go to my favorite restaurant. It was my first week back in Phoenix, and I really missed the restaurant. And I I had fasted, hoping to go there, and then it turned out that way. Now, the reason it bothered me so much wasn't even so much the students. Had my boss even explained to me that, these are very important students, whatever, it would have been fine. But he went completely silent and just asked me to stay till 9. And when I told him that I was hungry, he didn't seem to be bothered by that. That's what really bothered me, the breakdown in communication. I don't think this would have happened in Taiwan or Poland. And so both of my grandmothers are really old. I hope to spend more time in Taiwan anyway. I'll have to look for some opportunities over there. But anything, even having to be homeless in Taiwan beats having to deal with sexual prejudice and harassment here in the United States. It beats having to explain why I want to install UV lighting at my desk. Nobody deserves to live under the microscope and have to explain every detail of personal life, right? Why you install UV lighting, days you want off, um, uh, dietary preferences, sexual orientation. No, nobody deserves to live under a microscope like that, and I don't think people in Taiwan do. Uh, Actually, I would have preferred Poland, but obviously language barriers and all that, and my grandparents are kind of old anyway. Let's do some fortune telling with a deck of cards, since that's where I always get my answers. Jack, 2, 2, 9. Well, nine's kind of an unlucky number because it's short for 911, right? Like an emergency of some sort. Right? It really is. I'm feeling like I'm being run down every day from being solo sexual. I always get the most undesirable of hours at my job. 6, which means to social distance, right? Which I really need to do for my workplace, right? 10, 7, death. Joker, king, death. Ace, queen, 8, 5. 5 is a very unlucky number because it means to procrastinate. When I was a kid, I had trouble getting up to go to school. Actually, I had trouble getting up today because I was worried how my boss would react to me wanting a day off, and I uh, I would ask for 5 more minutes. I would say in Chinese, 5 minutes is pronounced 5分钟. My mom would say, "Come on, go to school." I would put out 5 fingers and I would say 5分钟. And eventually, I got so lazy, I only said 5. I would say "ooh," and I would put 5 fingers up. Now, my brother was 2 years old at the time, and he didn't know exactly what "ooh" meant. He just knew that every day when I would have trouble waking up, that's what I would say. And eventually, my brother started saying "ooh" every time we wanted him to do something that he wasn't ready to do, whether it be get up from bed, go to his daycare, or or go to sleep, right? Turn off the television, go to sleep. If my brother wasn't ready, he would say "ooh." So in his mind, "ooh" became shorthand for not yet, right? Procrastinate, right? I don't think he realized it was a number until much later in his life. Actually, we were playing a video game called Truxton. It's a space shooting game, and when you get a game over, the video game was a Sega Genesis, would ask you if you want to continue, and it would count down from 10, and on the screen it would say 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. And when it got to the 5, I would point to the screen and show him that's what "ooh" means. and he thought that the video game was called Ooh because he would want to play the video game, the Truxton, and he would point to the television and say Ooh Ooh Ooh, and so my brother had some big misconceptions on what the word Ooh actually meant, and so it's become kind of a funny word for me. In my mind, I just think it means to procrastinate. I love numerology. So one day, my students and I were working on a math problem, and the answer turned out to be 968. And in Chinese, eight is a very lucky number because it means to make a fortune, right? It sounds like the word for fortune. And I told my students, "Hey, 968, that's a really lucky number." And my student asked me why. And I said, because nine is short for 911, right? Like an emergency of some sort. Six means having the social distance from other people. And eight means to make a fortune. And so I said 968 kind of describes my life over the last couple of years, right? We had an emergency. I moved to Wallace and I really found myself. And maybe I didn't make a financial fortune, but I made a heartfelt fortune, right? I really felt at peace, right? And so I said 968 was a really lucky number for me. And my student really loved that story, although he didn't really understand the eight part of it. He only understood the nine and the six. So, but it was still a good story to tell him. Anyway, so I'm sick of jumping from one crisis to another here in the United States. I feel like every time I battle one of these issues at my job with various accommodations. The other day, I talked about going to a theme park and not being able to go on my favorite ride because you needed two people. And I wrote an email complaining about it. I feel like I spent way too much time resolving things than actually living here in the United States. And even though I love activism, right? So right now, I'm putting together a petition gathering to petition for every lunar eclipse to be a holiday, a national holiday, and I hope to gather some signatures. I love doing that. I love raising awareness. It's just that it's consuming way too much of my time and energy when I should be actually enjoying all of these things, right? And in Taiwan, I don't think that would be a big problem. In Taiwan, I'd probably just go to work and say that, we have a lunar eclipse. Who wants to go view it with me? And that would probably be the end of the story, right? Similarly in Poland, right? I can't imagine it being a long, drawn-out thing over there. Another lucky number of at the tutoring center, one of my students was having a hard time remembering what 8 times 8 was. And I told him, well, eight in Chinese sounds like to make a fortune. And we all really despise because I knew a little bit about how he views politics, and I knew he doesn't like the rich. And so I said, just imagine Bill Gates and Elon Musk got together, right? And now they have to social distance, so the six, and then they go, but despite all the social distancing, they end up dying anyway, right? To the four, right? So 8 times 8 is 64, right? Bill Gates and Elon Musk, they social distance and die anyway, right? So 8 times 8 is 64. And I told him to remember it like that. And he really liked the analogy, so that was good. I love numerology like that for some reason. And what else did I know I've seen interesting numbers in the past, but all right, let's do some more fortune telling. Ooh, ooh, right. King, queen, death. Queen, two. So the other lucky number for me is 3. The other lucky number for me is 3 because 3 means to be accepted for being solosexual. You got one person who's solosexual being accepted by a couple. Oh yeah, I remember now. I also taught him how to remember 9 times 7 was 63. I told him just think of it this way, right? You got two people who are almost rich, right? You got a 9 and a 7. They're not financially rich. They're rich at heart, right? And then to remember it as social distancing, and then being accepted for being single while you're social distance, right? So 63, right? So nine times 7 is 63. What else am I doing? Anyway, so we got the Federal Reserve raising interest rates and fighting inflation. And to show how much respect I have for that, here's a Federal Reserve note. That's how much respect I have for the Federal Reserve. Anyway, we got 2 more weeks until November 7. I hope to buy more bismuth, corner the market on bismuth. Hunt Brothers said, get rid of this and buy some real elements on the periodic table. I recommend bismuth and perhaps tellurium and indium. I am thinking of buying some thorium and maybe depleted uranium, and perhaps some of the platinum group metals, maybe iridium if I can get it at a good price. Let's see. Abundance of elements. If you just Google abundance of elements in Earth's crust and look at the chart, I like everything that's rare but cheap. So perhaps iodine, if you could have a good way of storing it. Potentially selenium and maybe antimony, if you had a good way of buying that. Do you want to go on a panel? I don't know what that is. Maybe some of the rare earth lanthanoids and actinoids. I haven't really found a good source of that is not super expensive in terms of premiums. I wouldn't. Tungsten might be okay. A lot of it is dug out of the ground. The abundance of it is not much in the earth, but we mine a lot of it. And for the most part, though, bismuth, indium, and tellurium and perhaps some selenium and maybe cadmium. But right now, the world is kind of frowning upon using cadmium. When I was a kid, we had nickel cadmium batteries. When I was in Wallace, Idaho, they had a museum full of all sorts of metals they get out of the ground, and they had this big bar of cadmium. It looked kind of like silver, actually. All right. I will seriously think about moving to Taiwan because I got accepted for who I am. Why the fuck would you live in the US if you don't get accepted for who you are?